Genius Prismatic Mage. Chapter 4. That was dangerous. Ray. The man stepped in. Ray was still standing there. And at his feet lay the body of one of the 5 men who had been chasing him. Blood from the man's head soaking into the ground. Did someone call for you? The man looked at Ray. Ray looked back at him and continued. You're not usually awake this early. He raised his right hand to wipe the blood off his face. Then heard the man respond. Yep. The man added. I heard that Hector's guys were on the prowl. The sky behind him was still dim, though hints of sunlight were starting to break through. He had broad shoulders and was wearing a blue shirt with black slacks today. This man was Niles, boss of the 17th Street. His gaze shifted to the puffy coat stuffed with food cans that Ray was clutching. But that there, did you get that from Hector? Ray continued to hold the cans tightly against his chest. Niles couldn't help but remark. You're bold. Ray tightened his grip on his collar and replied, thanks. Niles bent down a little, almost incredulous, and said, that wasn't a compliment. Ray replied, it was pretty difficult. Actually. Ray stared at Niles, his eyes filled with thought. People like Niles are hard to deal with. Ray had always noticed something off about Niles. There are people like him. Right now, in Ray's eyes, the color of the spiritual aura at the center of Niles' chest was a blank gray. He thought, people whose emotions are so monotonous that their vessel never really fills up. The man smoked a cigarette while talking to Ray. You're going to die at this rate. Man, you can't touch certain people. Ray watched him intently. Ray raised his right hand in a casual shrug, signaling no problem. If I don't, we'll starve anyway. Niles raised his left hand, still wearing short black gloves that reached his wrist, to support his head, reluctantly saying, anyways, I've repaid you for saving me now. After that, he listened to Ray's response. I fished you out of the river because I thought you were supplies. I didn't intend to help. Niles put his left hand in his pocket, took the cigarette with his right hand and held it out, speaking to Ray across from him. Well, I did live thanks to you. He stepped forward as Ray stayed standing there, the body of the man who chased Ray still lying by his feet. Ray looked up at Niles with a detached gaze and said, and you already paid me back for that. He recalled, a year ago. Back then, Ray was operating near the riverside when he spotted a man drifting ashore lying beside a pile of trash washed up by the water. Ray approached to check on him. The man was shivering from wounds and cold. Ray remembered. I happened to pull Niles out from the river. Later, Ray learned about his background from his story. Apparently, he used to be an executive of the 46th sector, but was betrayed. Ray fully trusted the man. I don't think he was lying about that. For one clear reason. The lessons on how to fight he gave me as repayment were quite structured. He taught Ray martial arts and combat, patiently guiding him when Ray was still inexperienced without showing fatigue. Back to the present, Ray asked Niles, about what you told me before. Russell. Niles dropped the cigarette on the ground and stomped on it to put it out. Then he asked Ray, what? Ray immediately replied, about me joining an organization. They stood facing each other, Niles with both hands in his trouser pockets, a gun tucked in the right pocket, the trigger facing inward. Ray's body was shorter than Niles. 2 different heights, looking unrelated, yet now sharing understanding on one topic. Ray repeated, I'll join yours. Niles. He spoke calmly with eyes full of determination. Ray thought, if I join his organization, the kids will be safe. Niles looked away, his gaze deep and dark. Russell. He strode in the opposite direction, then stood outside against a nearby wall, took out another cigarette, and put it in his mouth. Ray still stood there, watching his back. At that moment, Niles finally called out to Ray. Ray. That low voice echoed again, but this time it shocked Ray deeply. You can use magic. Right? Ray immediately replied to Niles. You know about magic. Though he asked. The truth was that before this, Niles wasn't really sure. Bingo. So it was true. I thought I had seen it wrong when he lit a fire without a lighter. Thinking this, Niles brought up a lighter to ignite his cigarette. Behind Niles, Ray was still stunned. He hurriedly asked again, tell me, what do you know about magic? Niles, still holding the cigarette, answered, the scar about 4 centimeters long on his right cheek moving with each word. Only a few things I asked a magician from my previous organization. As soon as he finished, he continued, that there is mana in the air, which is used for magic, and that there are only a handful of people who can detect and use mana. Ray was curious. Did he say anything about color? He asked while staring at Niles and leaning his body slightly toward where Niles was standing. Niles looked puzzled. Color? He didn't say anything about that. He said you couldn't see mana. Then, a spectrum of colors suddenly appeared in the air, right before Ray's eyes. Niles leaned against a white wall, glanced at Ray, while Ray looked up at the brilliant colors floating in midair. What am I seeing? Ray still felt something was missing, so he asked Niles, is that all? Did you forget something? He stared at Niles with determined eyes, while Niles was trembling with irritation. You want to get hit? He still had the cigarette in his mouth and swung a fist at Ray, but missed because Ray dodged to the side. Ray was serious. Your answer to my request? At this moment, both stood leaning against the wall. Ray on the left, Niles on the right. Niles immediately replied, no. Ray returned to the old topic. Why are you rejecting me all of a sudden? Niles fell silent, eyes gazing into the distance. He still had the cigarette in his mouth, thinking about something. All sectors are along the Elton River. Along the riverbank, the districts are lined up in order. Sector 47 then 48. And if you go up the river, you will arrive at other sectors. You can probably escape the slums and find a better life there. Niles continued thinking about Ray's fate. It would be too much of a waste. Ray's innocent face just happened to glance at Niles. For a kid with such abilities to die here. Niles turned to Ray. Have you ever thought about leaving the south sector? I can even find you a car. There was a slight height difference between them. Ray looked up and replied, no. You know I take care of kids here. Niles smiled. Don't worry about that. I'm thinking of starting an orphanage here. At the same time, he casually crossed his arms as if it was no big deal. Ray asked, an orphanage? Niles bent down and ruffled Ray's hair, smiling. Yeah, I'm gonna snatch orphans like you off the street. Ray looked at the other's chest. The spirit color's still chaotic. His colors are so thin. I can't tell if he's telling the truth, but he probably is. And Ray also realized, he has always kept his word. Niles and Ray kept their positions. Ray spoke first, by the way. Be careful. Hector seems like he's preparing for war. Ray saw Hector's men loading rifles and weapons onto trucks. I know. The man raised his hand and waved it back and forth. Ray understood. Using live rounds in any conflict. And only then did Ray remember that gunshots had fired. There was an unwritten rule among organizations in Sector 50 to only use knives during conflicts. Is a definite declaration of war. Ray told Niles. The people in the stores will suffer if you lose the war. I thought your organization's protection fees were actually somewhat reasonable. Niles replied. It only seems that way because there are a lot of people worse than me. He suddenly felt a bit odd. Stop treating me like I'm so old. I'm not even married, you know? Ray replied indifferently. You are old. The man frowned, growling at Ray, raised his right hand to punch him. But Ray dodged, making him miss. Meanwhile, the car window rolled down and a serious face appeared. Boss. We need to go. Niles saw him, and he said back to Ray, yeah, let's go. The man opened the back door, rummaged through the luggage, and threw something to Ray. It's going to be a war zone here. So find another hideout if you can. Then he added, and take this. Ray caught it. He didn't know what it was yet. This. It was a disinfectant. Niles raised his hand to his left ear, signaling to Ray, sanitize your ear. Ray also felt the dried blood crusted there. It seemed like he was injured during the fight with Humphrey. Niles' car disappeared at the end of the street. Ray looked up. The sky was covered by dark clouds, making the sunlight that had just poured down a few minutes ago look pale. It was always like that. When it rained, the sky would temporarily clear up, but later it became cloudy again due to the formation of clouds. Therefore, the streets in Sector 50 generally looked bleak. No color, no vitality or liveliness at all. A shoeshine boy squatting beside an old lady said, Ray. The boy noticed Ray and ran over. Why didn't you come back yesterday? He was the youngest boy in the group. The boy noticed something unusual. Why are you so hurt? Ray was stunned, seeing Ray's dirty raincoat and scratched face. The boy burst into tears, sobbed. Did you fight? Who did this to you? Ray waved his coat. It's nothing. I just fell. Ray couldn't take his eyes off the colorful mana flowing on Josephine's chest. How fascinating. The boy still cried. What must have hurt? Ray thought that a single person could feel so many emotions at once. Ray comforted the saddened boy. Take this can and head to the tent first. Tell Pale I'll be there soon. He patted the boy's small head. The sobbing quickly calmed down, as if it really worked. He then took out the can and put it into the shoeshine boy's bag. The boy's name was Josephine. The boy obediently replied, okay. Ray. Josephine hugged his bag tightly and disappeared toward the bridge. Ray watched him go. Ray asked the old lady who had just been talking with Josephine, Viola. Did you tell Josephine anything? She was an elderly lady sitting on a mat, eyes closed, looking frail. The old lady replied, Oh, it's Ray. I was telling her about the rainbows. She lifted her head when called, still smiling warmly with her eyes closed. The old lady was blind storyteller Viola. It was rumored she was over 100 years old. No doubt, she was the oldest person in the slums, though probably not that old. That was why the people in the slums respected her. The average lifespan in the slums was about 40 years, and a long life was proof of experience and wisdom. Even gang members didn't collect rent or bother her. Ray said to her, "Don't tell the kids about that. They won't get used to the streets if you keep telling them those fantasies." Ray had never dreamed about that, because he had no emotions. He was not allowed to imagine anything, nor feel happy or excited. He just knew that, the more you dream, the harder it is to survive on the streets. No exceptions, because children who can't root themselves in reality and drift in an imaginary world usually die before growing up. The kind old lady replied, "Who's going to hold fantasies if not the children?" Ray's gaze fell on Viola's closed eyes. He wondered, what emotion is that? The mana color Ray saw was purple mana. She was blind. Anyway, he thought she must have had an unusual past, considering how long she had lived. Above all else, there was always a dark purple mana aura on Viola's chest. Ray admitted, "I've never seen that in anyone besides Viola." That was why Ray couldn't take his eyes off the light on Viola's chest when he met her. What emotion does purple represent? It wasn't hard to find emotions corresponding to each mana color. Many specimens contained mana, and people usually expressed their emotions through immediate actions. Years of observation. In the end, most colored mana could be linked to related emotions. But purple mana was different, and you couldn't know what she was thinking or feeling just by looking at her. Ray turned to leave but called back, "You should move to another street. There might be a war here soon." Ray left a dry remark and walked away. The old lady still sat there, sighing. What a kind child. The next morning, afternoon on Street 17, Ray was transporting goods. That was the job he found and did daily. Ray knocked on a shop door. A tired voice inside called out, "What? It's you, Ray?" Ron was talking about how he was going to take care of deliveries now. When Ray knocked, a tired man appeared. Ray asked, "Did he?" Ray knew why. Ron won't be here anytime soon. Both his legs are broken. Ray swallowed the words he was about to say next. He stepped into the shop, asking the owner while arranging the goods he brought, "Aren't you going to evacuate too?" Ray couldn't help but wonder. You won't receive any customers if a war starts here. He thought it must take a lot of courage to enjoy drinks at a cafe in such a scary time. The shop owner reluctantly answered, "Where would I go if I left my store? And the war, it might not happen." Ray tilted his head, asking the owner, "What do you mean?" The shop owner pointed to a door inside the shop and said, "Hector and Niles are talking in there." He continued, "If things work out, there won't be war." Not long after, the door opened. A group of men came out of there. A man with a scarred face and a very sinister expression suddenly stopped and looked at Ray. 18th Street boss, Hector. He controlled half of Area 50 along with Niles. He was also the owner of a warehouse where Ray often stole food. The moment I saw one of their faces, Ray instinctively pulled his hood over his face and head. He stepped ahead of two subordinates, then asked the shop owner, "A kid? Working?" Where all the adults have turned pale. Hector was surprised, came closer to Ray, and patted his shoulder. "Yeah. Good work, kid. Work hard. That's how you make it in this world." He handed Ray a few coins. "Use this to buy yourself a treat." Hector and the two subordinates headed toward a car parked outside the door. "Let's go." "Boys," a subordinate answered. "Yes." Then, a man followed Hector, a tall, bald man about 190 centimeters. Humphrey, the silent leader of Hector's organization, looked back while Hector called out, "Goodbye." He glanced at Ray. His gaze focused directly on the earlobe inside Ray's hood. The day the black rain fell. That was where Ray got injured in the warehouse fight. Ray knew he had recognized him. "He recognized me." Ray could tell by instinct because he saw Humphrey's eyes narrow. At that moment, the leader called Humphrey. "Humphrey, what are you doing?" Humphrey turned and headed toward the car. "I'm going." "Sir." Boom. The car disappeared at the end of the street. The shop owner went to the door to see them off. Watching the car inside, they finally left. By now, Ray was certain the man had recognized him. He recognized the wound on my ear. He wondered, why did he leave without saying anything? Then, another voice rang out. "Niles. What happened?" Ray turned around and saw Niles sitting there, taking out a cigarette and lighting it with a sad expression. The shop owner stood next to him, looking at Niles with concern. Niles wanted to avoid war if possible, because once it happened, the damage in lives and property would definitely be severe. The use of guns on Hector gang members occupying Street 17 was also a warning. A warning and threat that we will never back down from war. But Hector didn't back down in today's negotiations. The negotiation failed. The new boundary of the area was established. Protection fees applied to each managed zone. There were many back and forth talks, but nothing developed. Hector demanded unreasonable conditions, and Niles had no choice but war. There will be war.